السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين، نحمده ونسبحه ونقدسه على آلائه ونعمائه، ونشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له، إلها واحدا أحدا فردا صمدا حيا قيوما، نؤمن له بالربوبية ونقر له بالعبودية. من يهدي الله فهو المهتدي ومن يضلل فلن تجد له وليا مرشدا. ونشهد أن سيدنا محمدا عبده ورسوله. أرسله بالهدى ودين الحق ليظهره على الدين كله. اللهم صل وسلم وزد وبارك وترحم على محمد وآل محمد كما صليت وسلمت وباركت وترحمت على إبراهيم وآل إبراهيم في العالمين إنك حميد مجيد. وصل اللهم وسلم على أوصيائه وخلفائه وعترته وأهل بيته. عباد الله، أوصيكم ونفسي بتقوى الله عز وجل. قال الله في كتابه الحكيم: بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم: وإذ ابتلى إبراهيم ربه بكلمات فأتمهن قال إني جاعلك للناس إماما قال ومن ذريتي قال لا ينال عهدي الظالمين. صدق الله العلي العظيم. وصلوا على محمد وآل محمد. Western scholars of Islam and historians who, in their own attempt to explain and elucidate what happened with the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ as he built the new Muslim community in Mecca and Medina, claim the following. They say that when the Prophet first began his mission, when he first began to propagate the message of this new faith, which started in Mecca, his appeal was less to the Christians and Jews and more to the pagan Arabs that were there. Now, history tells us that if you look at the population of Mecca at the time, there weren't as many Jews and Christians living in Mecca, or let's say people of the book living in Mecca, as there were to be when the Prophet migrated to Medina, especially the Jewish population in Medina. And so what they claim is that the Prophet in the beginning did not appeal as much to the people of the book, but he did appeal to the people who were learned. Learning and education at that time, see, today when we think of education and when we think of school, today it's the responsibility of every parent to send their children to school. And in most countries, such as this country, you have to, by law, you have to send your children to school. So school and that type of education that you receive from school is a right which is enjoined by all. This was not the case in 7th century Arabia. Not everybody learned how to read and write. It wasn't a right that was enjoyed by everybody. And that's why when we talk about illiteracy, when scholars discuss illiteracy, when it's mentioned in the Quran and attributed to the Prophet, what some scholars say is that it was essentially okay for the Prophet to have been illiterate, meaning not knowing how to read and write. Why? Because we're looking at it in retrospect, and today, in contemporary times, we assume that everybody goes to school and everybody learns. So when we look at it in retrospect and we look at the Prophet as not have been taught to read or write, we look at it in a negative way. Whereas really during that time, it was not something which was available to everybody. But there were people who were learned, there were people who were literate. So what these scholars say essentially is that the Prophet appealed to them in the beginning. And then when he went to Medina, he had to appeal to the people of the book, the Christians and the Jews, because there was a larger population of the people of the book in Medina versus Mecca. In fact, many of them, historians tell us that many of the people of the book had left Mecca. The reason why they had left Mecca was because of paganism and idolatry. When they saw that the Arabs were bringing back were bringing back idols because idolatry and paganism was not born in Mecca. It was an outside influence. It was brought from outside. So when the people of the book saw that the Arabs were doing this, they were filling Al-Masjid al-Haram, which even during those times was a respected place, a sanctuary. When they were filling it with idols, and when they were worshiping them, that pushed them away. And so they left Mecca. And by the time that the Prophet was born in Mecca, by the time he began his campaign in Mecca, there weren't many people of the book. But when he went to Medina, what these scholars say is that he had to begin to appeal to the people of the book. Now, when Western scholars study Islam, they study it from a secular point of view. It's different when you approach the topic as a believer, for instance, someone who believes in the message of the Prophet, or somebody who believes in the infallibility of the Prophet, versus somebody who is looking from the outside. Naturally, you make different assumptions, right? And there's cognitive bias which is involved, one can argue. But he had to appeal to what they say is that he had to appeal to the people of the book. And so when he went to Medina, they say, he began to mention the earlier prophets. He began to mention Nuh. He began to mention Ibrahim. He began to mention Musa and Isa. These were the prophets that those communities had believed in. These were the communities that had believed in the revelations that those prophets had received. And they had claimed to follow the law of those earlier prophets. And so what these scholars say is that that's exactly what the Prophet appealed to when he went to them. Is that he saw that, and of course this is in their terms, he saw that he could not influence them, so he had to mention Nuh, he had to mention Ibrahim, and that's why there is a mention of Ibrahim. Now, while some of the underlying assumptions are true, but sometimes, Amir al-Mu'mineen reminds us when the Khawarij stood against him, and when they said that there is no rule except for the rule of God, what did Amir al-Mu'mineen reply to them? He said, كَلِمَةُ حَقٍّ يُرَادُ بِهَا بَاطِلٌ. He said, what you say is true, because truly there is no God, and there is no authority except for God, but what you are implying is false. كَلِمَةُ حَقٍّ يُرَادُ بِهَا بَاطِلٌ. And sometimes you'll see arguments like that, where what the person is saying, the statement in itself is true, but what they are implying is false. So what they said was true, but what they were implying was false, because they look at the Prophet as a politician, as a statesman, as someone who simply just was trying to look for a way to spread his message and just to influence people. So what is true about that is, yes, the Prophet did appeal to the message of the prophets that came before. But it wasn't that he could not have had influence on them otherwise. Because what he brought with the Quran, his own message, was a message of truthfulness. And it was solid and standing on its own. One interesting verse in the Quran, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells the Prophet, and this is in the early chapters, in Surah Al-Baqarah and Surah Al-Imran, chapters 2 and chapters 3. Now chapter 2, beginning from around verse 124, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions the story of Ibrahim. وَإِذِ ابْتَلَى إِبْرَاهِيمَ رَبُّهُ بِكَلِمَاتٍ فَأَتَمَّهُنْ قَالَ إِنِّي جَاعِلُكَ لِلنَّاسِ إِمَامًا. In the context of the relationship with the Prophet's relationship with the Jews and Christians, and mentioning Ibrahim and what Ibrahim went through, one of the verses in particular is interesting. It says that Ibrahim was neither a Jew nor a Christian. وَلَكِنْ كَانَ, it says, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, ما كان إبراهيم يهوديا ولا نصرانيا ولكن كان حنيفا مسلما. That Ibrahim was neither a Jew nor was he a Christian. Rather, he was a Hanif. Hanif meaning a monotheist. That he worshipped God without associating any partners. And he was a Muslim. Muslim with a lowercase m, not with a capital M. Meaning Muslim, meaning that he was one who submitted himself to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, because the faith of Islam, as was delivered by our Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, was not existent at that time. So when the word Islam or Muslim is brought in that context, what it is referring to is someone who submits completely to the will of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Now, what is being implied there? What is being implied there? Well, the Quran talks about the specific perception that the Jews and Christians who were living in the Arabian Peninsula at that time had, and the attitude that they had. Because when you read different verses, they explain a little bit more of the attitude that they had, the it's my way or the highway attitude. That you have to believe in the way that we believe, or else you have not believed. Because in another verse, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala describes the same community. He says, كُونُوا هُودًا أَوْ نَصَارَى تَهْتَدُونَ. What they said was that you have to either be Hud, meaning Jewish, and it's an interesting term which is assigned to them. Hud, which comes from the term that they used to utter. They used to say hudna, meaning that we have been guided. So that's where that term comes from, Hud and Yahud. Kunu hudan aw nasara tahtadun. That either you join our faith, and the Christians say that you join our faith, and that's the only way that you will receive guidance. So the Quran is not condemning Judaism, nor is it condemning Christianity. It's condemning the attitude that these people had, that you have to believe in the same way that we believe, or else you have not believed. And that's why, it's interesting, because sometimes when we read the verses of the Quran, we think that, or we perceive that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is singling out certain communities just because they are those communities, or is singling out certain people. Why does the Quran not make mention of many names? Because people ask this question, is there are concepts which are so important. Why doesn't the Quran mention names? So why doesn't the Quran mention the names of the Imams, for instance? Well, the reason is because when the Quran is either in praise, in praise mode or condemnation mode, the name of the person is not very important. However, the attitude is very important, or the belief is very important. That's why when the Quran talks about certain communities or certain people, it's important for us as readers not to get hung up on the actual name. Because you'll see people today have animosity towards Christians and Jews because of what the Quran says. Because the Quran says, mentions them in this fashion. No, it's important to understand that they are condemned or praised, because sometimes they are praised as well, not because of who they are as a community, but because of what they believed. What they believed here is that you either have to believe what we believe as Jews, or you have to believe what we believe as Christians, or you have not received guidance. And that's why when the Quran talks about Ibrahim, when the Prophet speaks to the people of the book about Ibrahim, what does he say? He says that he was neither Jewish nor Christian. However, he was Hanif. He was a monotheist. Meaning what? It doesn't mean that he did not have the same message of Moses and he did not have the same message of Jesus. Why? Because the Quran affirms that all of the prophets, they had the same message in essence. What it is saying is that what you believe to be true does not necessarily apply to everybody. So it's that my way or the highway attitude, which really is not exclusive of the Jews and Christians. Here in the verse, it's attributed to the Jews and the Christians of that time. But that my way or highway attitude, many Muslims have today as well. Either you believe what I believe, or you have not believed. And not just Muslims. This applies with people from the same faith, but of different schools of thought. correct? I am from a certain school of thought. The only way you have believed is if you've believed the way I've believed, and that's it. And you can never be right if you believe in something else. And really the Quran warns us against that type of belief. It says, look, this is the danger that they fell into, those communities back then. They believed that their way of thinking was the only way of thinking. And sometimes as Muslims today, we fall into that trap as well. We think that only my way of thinking is the correct way of thinking. Only the way that my parents taught me and my community taught me, that's the only way to think. That's the only way to properly think. And there's no other way of thinking, and there's no other way of believing, whereas the Quran condemns this. So that's why, that's one instance where the Prophet mentions, our Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam mentions Prophet Ibrahim to the Jews and Christians, the people of the book that were in Medina, just to show them the fallacy of their ways. And to be free thinkers, because one of the issues that's brought up, why they are condemned is because they believed what they believed because as a result of them not being free thinkers. Sometimes it wasn't a matter of what was right and what was wrong. It's simply, I believe in this because my father believed this way, or because my grandfather believed in this way. Anyways, the Quran talks about the Prophet Ibrahim in Surah Al-Baqarah, beginning from verse 124. He says, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, وَإِذِ ابْتَلَى إِبْرَاهِيمَ رَبُّهُ بِكَلِمَاتٍ فَأَتَمَّهُنْ قَالَ إِنِّي جَاعِلُكَ لِلنَّاسِ إِمَامًا قَالَ وَمِنْ ذُرِّيَّتِي. Ibrahim's reply, what about my progeny? قَالَ لَا يَنَالُ عَهْدِي الظَّالِمِينَ. What does this verse say? And remember when his Lord, meaning the Lord of Ibrahim, tried Ibrahim. Ibtala. The word here is ibtala. وَإِذِ ابْتَلَى إِبْرَاهِيمَ رَبُّهُ. Even though the word Ibrahim comes before the word Rabb, but the way it's structured in the Arabic language, if you read it, وَإِذِ ابْتَلَى إِبْرَاهِيمُ رَبَّهُ, that would be kufr. That would be saying that Ibrahim tested his Lord, whereas it was the other way around. وَإِذِ ابْتَلَى إِبْرَاهِيمَ رَبُّهُ. So that means that his Lord, Ibrahim's Lord, tested him. بِكَلِمَات. He tested him and he tried him with words. Now what do commentators say? What are these words? Well, some commentators say that these words are commandments which were given from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to Ibrahim. So some of these commandments are basically to institute various kinds of rights, such as the maintenance of personal hygiene. Some scholars have said that no, this refers to the rites of Hajj. And now we are in the Hajj season. We are nearing the end of the month of Dhul Qa'dah and approaching the month of Dhul Hijjah. And these practices, the rites that the pilgrims perform, are rites which were established during the time of the Prophet Ibrahim when he raised the foundations of the Kaaba, which were there. And beginning from that verse, chapter 2, verse 124 onwards, the story of Ibrahim is given. So what does Ibrahim do? What does he ask from his Lord? What does his Lord ask from him? And some of the prayers of the Prophet Ibrahim after he completed his mission. These are very important. So he says, I tested you and I tried you. And so it doesn't, this verse specifically doesn't say what was the test, what was the trial. But if you study the life of Ibrahim, you would see that he went through a number of trials. Number one, he started with his own people who forgot the worship of God and would associate partners with God, the idol worshippers. And his story is mentioned in the Quran where he toppled one of the idols during one of the festivals and destroyed them. And they decided, because of his insolence and then because of his blasphemy, because he defended his act against the false idols, that they would punish him and that they would throw him into a burning fire. And they placed him in a catapult because the fire was so big, it generated so much heat that they couldn't get close to it, so they had to catapult him in. Narrations tell us that mothers would not feed their children so that they could save money to purchase wood to burn in the fire. That's how extreme they were in their false belief. And sometimes people, they get that extreme in their false belief. Right now we're living at a time here in the United States, and what happened last weekend and what might happen this weekend as well, where you see extremity, you see extreme behavior manifest right in front of you. And what does that show us? That shows us that extreme behavior is not limited to a certain time. So when the Quran is talking about extreme behavior, this isn't something that just happened 1400 years ago, or in the case of Ibrahim, thousands of years ago. This is something which is manifest. And that's why the hadith tells us that what the Quran talks about is relevant for every day and every age and every place. So they wanted to launch him into the fire, and they placed him into the catapult. Jibreel comes to him and he tells him, you've passed the test. You've gotten to a point where you've passed the test. You're sitting in the catapult, they're waiting to burn you. And he says, I'm here as a messenger from God, and I'm here to help you throughout this journey. Anything that you wish, anything that you ask for, I'm here to obey your commands. I'm here to help you. I'm here to assist you. And Ibrahim, at that moment, imagine, finally you've gotten your ticket. When you're put in that position and somebody finally shows you a way out, what happens? You jump on that opportunity. Still, Ibrahim, he was patient, and he said the following. He said, you can't help me. Only my Lord can help me. You, Jibreel, you can't help me. You don't have the power to help me. Only my Lord can help me. He said, okay, if I can't help you, then ask. Make a statement. Say something. Ask for your request. And then he said, Ibrahim responded, he said, عِلْمُهُ بِحَالِ يُغْنِي عَنْ سُؤَالِي. He says, his knowledge of what is in my heart, it suffices for me. So much so that I don't need to ask. Because my Lord is my creator. He's the creator of my heart. He knows what's in my heart. The creator knows what's best in the creation. He says, my Lord created me. He knows what's in my heart. عِلْمُهُ بِحَالِ يُغْنِي عَنْ سُؤَالِي. And this was just one of the tests. The Quran talks about the other tests that he went through. He came across a Namrud, and he argued him in the context of the creation of God. And Namrud had claimed that he was a creator. And narrations later tell us, because they part ways, but narrations later tell us that a Namrud dies due to an insect biting him. A man who saw himself as a god is brought down by a tiny insect. And then, of course, he continues to the Arabian Peninsula, where he is ordered to raise the foundations of the Kaaba and sacrifice his own son with his own hand, with his own knife in front of him. Multiple attempts. And so when the Quran, although the Quran doesn't mention them in this verse, but we know through reading other verses what that ibtila was. And of course, when he sacrifices his own son, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says that this is truly this is the real ibtila. That he had to take something that he loved, or someone that he loved so much, and he was ordered to destroy that thing with his own hands. That was a true test of the servitude. Anyways, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells him that because you've gone through that, we've made you as an imam. And that's one of the few times where the word imam is mentioned in the Quran. Inni ja'aluka lin-nasi imama. Truly you're a leader, not because your name is Ibrahim, or because you came from a certain family, but because you were tested and tried and you passed the test. Every struggle that you go through today in your life, that's what makes you a leader. Leaders are people who have experienced what life has, and they're able to lead other people because of their experiences, whether they were good or bad experiences. But that's one definition of a leader. Inni ja'aluka lin-nasi imama. Ibrahim cherished this title so much. You know, when you cherish something, you don't just want it for yourself. You want it for your loved ones. If somebody gave you a gift that you cherish, and something that you really love and you really value, the first thing that you would want is, you would want that thing for other people. You would wish that good upon other people. And that's what Ibrahim did. When God told him, I'm making you a leader, I'm putting you in that position of leadership, he said, وَمِن ذُرِّيَّتِي. What about my dhurriyyah? What about my people? What about my descendants? And so Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells him, قَالَ لَا يَنَالُ عَهْدِي الظَّالِمِينَ. That those who are oppressors, they shall not take hold of my promise. They shall not take hold of my covenant. So some of them shall be chosen. And of course, from that dhurriya, because later on the Quran talks about the dhurriya, the descendants of Ibrahim, and our own Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam as a descendant of Ibrahim. But God makes it clear that if this person is an oppressor, then that person shall not represent me. That person shall not represent my promise and my covenant. Again, the Quran, it continues, and in the next couple of verses, the Quran says that, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says that after Ibrahim established that home, after he lifted the foundations of that home, we decreed that home becomes an area which is safe, and it becomes recognized as a sanctuary where no fighting shall take place, where there shall be no bloodshed, where even insects and animals and wildlife are protected. That's the sanctuary of that place. In the next verse, the verse after that, Ibrahim then prays to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He says, "O Allah, رَبِّ اجْعَلْ هَذَا الْبَلَدَ آمِنًا." O Allah, make this a place which is a sanctuary, which is safe, where people are protected, where animals are protected, where wildlife even is protected, so that we can honor you. And it's interesting because even during the time where Mecca was situated in that time, the pre-Islamic Jahiliyyah time, where civil wars were rampant, and you look at Medina and you had the 100 Years' War between the Aus and the Khazraj. You had similar battles in and around Mecca. There was an understanding that Mecca shall be a place of security. It shall be a sanctuary. That if people come and seek refuge in that city, they shall be granted refuge. If they want protection, they shall be granted protection. That no blood shall be shed. These were the rules of Mecca since the time of Ibrahim, and it is said that even the pagan Arabs, they respected these rules to a certain extent. And I'll end with the following, because when we talk about the Hajj season, and what follows the Hajj season is the season of Muharram. And when you track what is so admirable, and I'll mention this in the end, what is so admirable about the character of Imam Hussein alayhi salam is that he recognized the sanctity of that land that was established during the time of Ibrahim. He recognized that it was a place of purity. He recognized that it was not a place where conflict shall arise. Even if you're the son of the Prophet or the grandson of the Prophet, it becomes your responsibility to make sure that is a protected and sanctified place. And that's why when Imam Hussein alayhi salam left from Medina to Mecca to perform the Hajj, and then he was unable to perform the Hajj because it is said that Yazid had commanded that assassins be sent to Mecca because he had refused to pledge allegiance to Yazid, that assassins be sent to Mecca and that he be killed even if he is clinging to the walls of the Kaaba. So when Imam Hussein alayhi salam understood, and when he came to know of this threat, what did he do? He took the responsibility himself. Even though he was not responsible, he was not carrying a weapon. He was not going to fight. He was not the aggressor. He was not the oppressor. He wasn't the one that was going to initiate the conflict, but he understood that I am in a position where I can avoid conflict. That's why sometimes we have this mentality that I didn't start it. He started it, right? When we get into a conflict with somebody, sometimes it's even with our own brothers, our own siblings, our own cousins, our own relatives. And we stop communicating with them for 5, 10, 15, 20 years, and we cut off relationships with them. And our excuse, I've seen many times when I talk to people, I ask them, why haven't you spoken to your brother for 10 years? He says, Sayyidina, he started it. He started it. That mentality of he started it. Whereas Imam Hussein says, it doesn't matter who started it. I'm going to be the adult, I'm going to be the proper person, and I'm going to do whatever it requires of me to avoid conflict. And that's why Imam Hussein, he stands and he delivered his sermon on the day of Arafat, and he left. Because he understood that place was a place it was a sanctuary, it was a place of security, it was a place that must be respected. So we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to bless us in this holy month and the coming months, inshallah. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Wal asri inna al-insana lafi khusr illa alladhina amanu wa amilu salihat wa tawasaw bil haqqi wa tawasaw bil sabr wa sallu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين نحمده ونسبحه ونقدسه على آلائه ونعمائه ونشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له ونشهد أن سيدنا محمدا عبده ورسوله اللهم صل وسلم وزد وبارك وترحم على محمد وآل محمد كما صليت وسلمت وباركت وترحمت على إبراهيم وآل إبراهيم إنك حميد مجيد وصل اللهم وسلم على أوصيائه وخلفائه وعترته وأهل بيته علي أمير المؤمنين وقائد الغر المحجلين وعلى البضعة الطاهرة فاطمة الزهراء سيدة نساء العالمين وعلى سبط نبي الرحمة وسيد شباب أهل الجنة الحسن والحسين وعلى علي بن الحسين ومحمد بن علي وجعفر بن محمد وموسى بن جعفر وعلي بن موسى ومحمد بن علي وعلي بن محمد والحسن بن علي والخلف الهادي المهدي عجل الله تعالى فرجه وسهل مخرجه وجعلنا من أنصاره وأعوانه عباد الله أوصيكم ونفسي بتقوى الله عز وجل. It's been narrated that today, this date in the month of Dhul-Qa'dah, represents the birth of the Prophet Ibrahim and according to some narrations also the birth of the Prophet Isa alayhi salam. And I thought I'd mention one of the narrations which is narrated by Al-Allama Muhammad Baqir al-Majlisi in Bihar al-Anwar. He narrates the following. He says that the Prophet Isa alayhi salam, he sent forth two of his companions on an errand, to perform an errand. And both of these companions came back, and when they came back, of course, it doesn't talk about how long it took them to run these errands. It must have been a long time. But when they came back, one of them was like a withered water skin. If you've ever drank water out of a canteen, a water skin, when it's emptied, it collapses on itself, it withers. One of them came back, he was skinny, he was like a withered water skin. And another came back and he had gained a lot of weight. You know, he was fleshy, he was fattened. And so Isa alayhi salam asked them, he said, what is it that brought to you this state? What is it that brought you to this state? So the one that had basically lost weight, had become like a little withered water skin, had said, fear in Allah. I had fear. So he asked the other one, who had gained some weight, who would look like he was doing well, he said, what about you? What brought you to this state? He said, trust in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. One of them had fear, and one of them had trust. Now these are both desirable moral attributes, to have fear in Allah, but also to have trust in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But these are two complementary states. And the reason I say that is because we're taught more about fear than about trust. We're always taught to fear something. And what's interesting is this narration shows us the physical effects that fear may have, that a person becomes weakened. So if you have fear, but no trust in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, then this happens to you. If you have a lot of trust, and you're very, very confident with what you have, to the point where you don't fear anything anymore, you become the opposite of that. That's why there has to be a balance between the two. Not that you're always afraid. Fear is, yes, it's a good thing, but fear is good when it is accompanied with trust in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Yes, I fear myself, not Allah. I fear myself that I will do the wrong thing. That's why it has to be accompanied with trust. And whatever you fear right now, you have to have trust that in the end, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will make it right for you. And that's the type of fear which is praised. Not simply fearing someone or something to the point where you can't sleep at night, to the point where you can't eat, to the point where it begins to physically and mentally affect you. The reason I bring this up is because we live today in a world of fear. And I want to address what happened yesterday the tragic event in Barcelona, Spain, where people lost their lives and many innocent people were injured. And this is unfortunately, and we don't say this so that we minimize the tragedy ever. When we say that this has become normal, it's not to minimize the tragedy. A tragedy is always a tragedy. Narrations tell us that when innocent blood is spilled, the angels and everything in the celestial realm of God shakes and shivers when even one drop of innocent blood is spilled. It doesn't say innocent Muslim blood, innocent human blood, any human being, Muslim, non-Muslim. And what this shows really today in the world that we're living in is a weakness. Extremists, they are losing ground. They are losing territory. And before the fall, they are trying to do as much damage as they can. And so it's not in any way a good sign because innocent people are affected and innocent people are hurt. However, it exposes that the aggressors and the oppressors, they are finally, and they will, one day they will come to a halt, and they will stop, and they will be stopped. And that's why the least that we can do is we can voice our concern and stand with them in solidarity. And this may be a fearful time for many people, but we must also trust in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We must also trust that in the end, everything will be fine and justice will be served. Of course, as a community, we unequivocally stand against the atrocities that are being created by, that are being committed by extremists. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to bring comfort to all of those who are adversely affected all across the world. Whether it's here home or whether it's in Europe or whether it's in the Middle East or Africa or wherever it is, we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to bring relief to those who are affected, and we ask Him to strengthen our hearts and to bring us closer to one another in cooperation and unity and harmony so that we may unequivocally stand against violence, against oppression, and against extremism. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. اللهم اغفر للمؤمنين والمؤمنات والمسلمين والمسلمات الأحياء منهم والأموات تابع بيننا وبينهم بالخيرات إنك مجيب الدعوات إنك قاضي الحاجات إنك على كل شيء قدير برحمتك يا أرحم الراحمين وصلى الله وسلم على سيدنا محمد وعلى أهل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين. أشهد أن محمدا رسول الله أشهد أن محمدا رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم أشهد أن عليا ولي الله أشهد أن عليا حجة الله حي على الصلاة حي على الصلاة حي على الفلاح حي على الفلاح حي على خير العمل حي على خير العمل قد قامت الصلاة قد قامت الصلاة الله أكبر الله أكبر لا إله إلا الله يا محسن قد أتاك المسيء أنت المحسن وأنا المسيء تجاوز عن قبيح ما تعلم مني يا ذا الجلال والإكرام الله أكبر بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم يسبح لله ما في السماوات وما في الأرض الملك القدوس العزيز الحكيم هو الذي بعث في الأميين رسولا منهم يتلو عليهم آياته ويزكيهم ويعلمهم الكتاب والحكمة وإن كانوا من قبل لفي ضلال مبين وآخرين منهم لما يلحقوا بهم وهو العزيز الحكيم ذلك فضل الله يؤتيه من يشاء والله ذو الفضل العظيم مثل الذين حملوا التوراة ثم لم يحملوها كمثل الحمار يحمل أسفارا بئس مثل القوم الذين كذبوا بآيات الله والله لا يهدي القوم الظالمين قل يا أيها الذين هادوا إن زعمتم أنكم أولياء لله من دون الناس فتمنوا الموت إن كنتم صادقين ولا يتمنونه أبدا بما قدمت أيديهم والله عليم بالظالمين قل إن الموت الذي تفرون منه فإنه ملاقيكم ثم تردون إلى عالم الغيب والشهادة فينبئكم بما كنتم تعملون يا أيها الذين آمنوا إذا نودي للصلاة من يوم الجمعة فاسعوا إلى ذكر الله وذروا البيع ذلكم خير لكم إن كنتم تعلمون فإذا قضيت الصلاة فانتشروا في الأرض وابتغوا من فضل الله واذكروا الله كثيرا لعلكم تفلحون وإذا رأوا تجارة أو لهوا انفضوا إليها وتركوك قائما قل ما عند الله خير من اللهو ومن التجارة والله خير الرازقين الله أكبر اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد لا إله إلا الله الحليم الكريم لا إله إلا الله العلي العظيم سبحان الله رب السماوات السبع ورب الأرضين السبع وما فيهن وما بينهن ورب العرش العظيم والحمد لله رب العالمين الله أكبر سبحان ربي العظيم وبحمده سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان الله سمع الله لمن حمده الله أكبر سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان الله الله أكبر الله أكبر سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان الله الله أكبر حول الله وقوته أقوم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم قل هو الله أحد الله الصمد لم يلد ولم يولد ولم يكن له كفوا أحد الله أكبر سبحان ربي العظيم وبحمده سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان الله سمع الله لمن حمده الله أكبر سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان الله الله أكبر الله أكبر سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان الله اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد يا ولي العافية أسألك العافية عافية الدين والدنيا والآخرة بمحمد وعشرته الطاهرة الله أكبر بسم الله وبالله الحمد لله وخير الأسماء الحسنى لله أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد السلام عليك أيها النبي ورحمة الله وبركاته السلام علينا وعلى عباد الله الصالحين السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته الله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر
إن الله وملائكته يصلون على النبي يا أيها الذين آمنوا صلوا عليه وسلموا تسليما اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد عجل فرجه تسبيحات حضرت زهرا صلى الله عليه وسلم اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين الشاء والإحياء والأمر عبدك ورسولك أدى ما حملته إلى العباد وجاهد في الله عز وجل حق الجهاد فأنه بشر بما هو حق من الثواب وأنذر بما هو سر من العقاب. اللهم ثبتني على دينك ما أحييتني ولا تزغ قلبي بعد إذ هديتني وهب لي من لدنك رحمة إنك أنت الوهاب. صل على محمد وعلى آل محمد واجعلني من أتباعه وشيعته واحشرني في زمرته ووفقني لأداء فرض الجمعة وما أوجبت علي فيها من الطاعات وقسمت لأهلها